A world without roads is a world without connection. Before the first stones were laid, empires stood alone, separated by vast and treacherous wilderness. The story of civilization is written along the paths we built. Today, we are tracing 25 timeless road networks that defined the very shape of our world. You will discover how a single route could spread a new faith, spark a devastating illness, or decide the rise and fall of a superpower. How did a hidden trail in the Andes become the spine of an empire without wheels? Why would a king invest a fortune in a road used by pilgrims? By the end, you will see the map of history not as a collection of countries, but as a living web of ancient highways. What invisible road from the past do you think you are traveling on right now? The dawn of the road was not a sudden flash of inspiration, but a slow, grinding evolution of necessity. For countless generations, our ancestors moved along the lines of least resistance, following the winding trails of deer and the gentle curves of river valleys. These were not roads in any sense we would recognize, but organic threads woven into the landscape by the feet of animals and the needs of nomadic life. Then something profound changed the equation. The rise of agriculture, beginning roughly 10,000 years ago, anchored people to the land. With the first harvests of domesticated grain, the first permanent settlements took root, and with them came the first surpluses. A community that could produce more food than it needed immediately faced a new problem: how to store that surplus, how to trade it, and crucially, how to protect it. The informal, meandering game trail was no longer sufficient. What was needed was a reliable, repeatable corridor, a line of control etched into the earth itself. The earliest known engineered road we have discovered speaks directly to this new, monumental ambition. Around 4,000 years before the Common Era, in ancient Egypt, workers constructed a paved causeway to transport the massive limestone blocks needed to build a pyramid. This was not a public thoroughfare for travelers, but a dedicated industrial artery, a private road for a singular, staggering purpose. It represents a fundamental leap in human thought, the deliberate reshaping of the landscape, not just to move from one place to another, but to move specific, heavy things over a specific, efficient route. This shift from path to project changed everything. A reliable road allowed a ruler in a central city to command resources from distant quarries, to feed thousands of specialized workers who no longer farmed, and to project power far beyond the sight of his palace walls. As the historian Thurn observed, the history of the world is, in many ways, the history of communication. And these first crude paved tracks were the original sentences in that long story, physical declarations of control, commerce, and collective effort. The story of our civilization truly begins not with the invention of the wheel, but with the deliberate act of clearing and hardening a path, making the first purposeful step onto a road built not by nature, but by human will. So what separates a forgotten track from a timeless highway? It is a question of legacy, not longevity. Many ancient roads were built, served their purpose, and faded back into the earth. A timeless network, however, achieves something far greater. It outlives the civilization that built it, escaping its original intent to become a permanent feature of the human landscape. For a road to earn that title, it must meet a few profound criteria. First is engineering innovation. We are not just talking about laying down stones. We are talking about solutions to problems that plague all builders, solutions so effective they whisper across centuries. Advanced drainage systems that kept a road dry for 1,000 winters, or a layered foundation so durable that modern asphalt cracks long before it does. This technical brilliance is the physical reason the road survived, but survival is not enough. The second, more crucial criterion is strategic longevity. A timeless road is perpetually useful. It connects points of value that never really change, like fertile valleys, mountain passes, or sheltered harbors. Because of this, it is not abandoned. When one empire falls, the next one arrives, looks at the old road, and decides it is far easier to repair it than to build a new one. It becomes a piece of infrastructure so vital that every new power, every new culture adopts it, adapts it, and fights to control it. This is where a road transcends stone and mortar. It becomes a channel for everything that moves. Armies march on it, yes, but so do merchants with exotic spices, pilgrims with new prayers, and refugees carrying stories of distant lands. The road facilitates the flow of ideas, technologies, and belief systems, weaving them into the cultural identity of an entire region. Finally, the most telling sign of a timeless road is when you cannot escape its path. Look at a modern map, that major highway following a river valley, that railway cutting through a mountain pass, that flight path over a desert. Chances are, they are tracing a route established 2,000 years ago. These networks become desire lines on a continental scale, routes of such inherent logic and efficiency that humanity, regardless of era or technology, keeps returning to them. They did not just serve an empire, they quietly dictated where future cities would rise, where borders would be drawn, and where the great currents of history would flow for ages to come. That first, deliberate step onto an engineered path found its ultimate expression in a single, breathtaking line across the ancient world. The royal road of the Achaemenid Persian Empire was a stroke of administrative genius, a 2,500-kilometer spine that connected the empire's administrative heart at Susa to the wealthy western capital at Sardis. Built on the orders of King Darius I in the 5th century before the Common Era, this was far more than a simple dirt track for traders. It was the world's first true information superhighway, a physical network designed to move intelligence faster than thought itself. The Persian engineers did not just clear a path, they built a system. At regular intervals, approximately every 25 kilometers, they constructed waystations stocked with fresh horses and supplies. Here, a royal messenger known as a paradasish would thunder in, transfer his official satchel to a waiting rider on a fresh mount, and send him galloping down the line. This relay system was so brilliantly efficient that a message could travel the entire staggering distance from one end of the empire to the other in just 7 days. A journey that would take an ordinary caravan 3 months was completed in a single week. The Greek historian Herodotus, who documented this marvel, wrote with awe that nothing in the world traveled faster than these Persian couriers. But speed was only part of the design. Guard posts and garrisons dotted the route, ensuring security. This allowed more than just messages to flow. Imperial troops could be deployed with shocking swiftness to quell unrest in a distant province. Tax collectors could reliably move precious metals and goods back to the royal treasuries. Caravans carrying luxuries like deep blue lapis, lazuli from Afghanistan, or cinnamon from distant lands moved under the protection of the king's peace. The true legacy of the royal road, however, was not in the stones or the waystations. It was in the radical idea it embodied. Darius ruled over dozens of different peoples, from Egyptians and Babylonians to Greeks and Indians, all with their own languages, gods, and customs. Holding such a vast, multicultural realm together required more than fear, it required connection. The royal road was the physical manifestation of that connection. It bound the empire into a coherent whole, allowing a decree issued in the spring at Susa to be enacted in Anatolia before the summer heat faded. It proved that the stability of a superpower depended not on the thickness of its fortress walls, but on the speed and reliability of its communication. This principle, that information is the ultimate currency of control, would become the foundational lesson for every empire that followed, echoing down the centuries to our own digital age. The Persians understood that to rule a world, you first had to tie it together with a single, unbreakable thread. The Persian model proved that an empire could be held together by information, but it took another civilization to turn the road into a permanent, physical doctrine of control. The Romans did not just build roads, they engineered conquest into the landscape itself. It began in 312 before the Common Era, with a single, strategic line known as the Via Egnatia. Faced with a military threat in the south, the Roman censor Appius Claudius Caecus ordered the construction of a direct, paved highway from Rome to the city of Capua. This was not a leisurely route. It was a military instrument built wide, straight, and durable so that legions could march swiftly to the front and supplies could follow without delay. The success of this first great road revealed a profound truth to the Roman mind. Mobility equaled power, and so, over the next centuries, they embarked on the most ambitious public works project the ancient world had ever seen, weaving a web of over 250,000 miles of engineered highways that stretched from the misty highlands of Britain to the sun-baked deserts of Syria. What made a Roman road so timeless? It was a masterpiece of layered engineering, a literal foundation for an empire. Surveyors, known as agrimensors, would first plot a relentlessly straight course, often ignoring gentle hills and shallow valleys in favor of directness. Then laborers would dig a trench, building up from the bottom, a foundation of packed sand or mortar, then a layer of small stones set in cement, followed by a course of gravel or crushed tile, and finally a surface of large, interlocking polygonal stones, expertly fitted and crowned so that rainwater would drain into flanking ditches. They built not for a decade but for a millennium. These roads were flanked by curbstones and punctuated by milestones, stone pillars that told a traveler the distance to the next town, and more importantly, the distance to Rome. That phrase, "all roads lead to Rome," was not just a poetic saying. It was a statement of political and economic reality. Every highway was a physical tether, pulling goods, taxes, soldiers, and ideas back to the capital. This network enabled the legendary mobility of the Roman legions, allowing them to reinforce threatened frontiers with shocking speed. It allowed a merchant in Gaul to sell wine in Egypt, and for Egyptian grain to feed the million inhabitants of Rome. Latin spread along these routes, as did Roman law, architecture, and the very concept of Romanitas, that cultural identity of being Roman. The road was the ultimate symbol of order imposed upon a chaotic world. And their legacy is not buried. The next time you look at a map of Europe, notice the unnervingly straight lines of many modern highways or country lanes. That road you drive on in England or France may very well be sitting atop the original stone foundation laid by Roman engineers 2,000 years ago. Their roads outlived their empire because they answered a need so fundamental that every civilization since has simply repaved them, following the same unyielding lines first drawn by the surveyor's rod. While Roman roads enforced a single, central authority, a different kind of network was flourishing to the east, one that thrived precisely because no single empire could ever fully control it. This was the vast, shimmering constellation of routes we call the Silk Roads, a network of networks connecting the workshops of China to the markets of the Mediterranean for over 1,500 years. Think of it not as a single highway, but as a sprawling, organic system of capillaries, a living web of caravan tracks, mountain trails, and desert crossings that pulsed with the movement of goods and ideas across the roof of the world. Its name comes from its most famous luxury product, Chinese silk, a fabric so coveted in Rome that it was literally worth its weight in gold. But silk was merely the glittering surface. The true cargo of these routes was far more transformative. Buddhism traveled from India, finding new hearts and minds in the kingdoms of Central Asia and eventually in China itself. Technologies like papermaking and the magnetic compass journeyed westward, altering the course of scholarship and navigation forever. Even the culinary landscape shifted as spices like pepper and cinnamon, once unimaginable luxuries, began to season distant dinners. This was the ancient world's internet, a slow, physical system for the exchange of data where the data was culture itself. What defined the Silk Roads was not imperial engineering, but brutal geography and profound human adaptation. The routes snaked through some of the most unforgiving terrain on the planet. Caravans faced the waterless void of the Taklamakan Desert, whose name ominously translates to place of no return. They inched across the dizzying high passes of the Pamir Mountains, the so-called roof of the world, where the air grew thin and the cold bit to the bone. Survival depended on a fragile chain of oasis cities, glittering like emeralds in the sand. Places like Samarkand and Bukhara were not just stops for water, they were cosmopolitan hubs where languages, religions, and goods intermixed. Here, a traveler could find a caravanserai, a fortified inn with a large central courtyard where camels could rest and merchants could barter, safe behind thick walls for the night. The historian Peter Frankopan reminds us that this system made the world global long before the modern age, creating a continuous zone of contact that stretched for thousands of miles. The legacy of the Silk Roads is a lesson in soft power. While empires rose and fell with dramatic violence, these trade routes accomplished something more enduring through persistent, indirect contact. They reshaped cultures not by decree but by desire. A Chinese princess might never see Rome, but she could wear glassware crafted there. A Persian astronomer could use mathematical concepts developed in India. This constant, osmotic exchange proved that commerce and curiosity could weave civilizations together more tightly than any army ever could. The roads carried more than spices and silk. They carried the very ingredients of modernity, mixing them slowly across continents until the world, for the first time, began to feel connected. The Roman and Silk Roads shaped continents, but another empire built its highways across the very roof of the world. In the vertiginous peaks of the Andes, the Inca faced a challenge that would have paralyzed other civilizations. They ruled a territory longer than the distance from Rome to London, yet it was a vertical empire, a realm of deep coastal deserts, jagged mountain ranges reaching over 20,000 feet, and dense cloud forests. To connect this impossible landscape, they engineered the Qhapaq Ñan, the Royal Road, a 25,000-mile network that stands as one of humanity's greatest physical achievements, built without the wheel, without iron, and without a written word. This was not a road as Europe or Asia understood it. It was a multifaceted adaptation to a world of extremes. In the high mountains, workers carved stairways directly into cliff faces. Across raging glacial rivers, they suspended bridges woven from native grasses, their cables as thick as a man's body, which swayed alarmingly but held for generations. On steep slopes, they built retaining walls and paved the way with flat stones to prevent erosion. The road was the empire's central nervous system, and its messengers were the chasquis, a relay of highly trained runners. Operating in the thin air of the high Andes, a chasqui would sprint to a tambo, a way station a few miles away, and pass a verbal message or a knotted string record called a quipu to the next runner. This system was so efficient it could deliver fresh seafood from the Pacific coast to the mountain capital of Cusco, over 200 miles away, in under 2 days. But the Qhapaq Ñan was more than a postal service. It was the ultimate tool of integration. Conquered peoples were required to contribute labor to the road's maintenance as part of their service to the state, a practice that physically tied them to the imperial project. Along the road traveled not just soldiers and administrators, but also specialists, metalworkers, weavers, and priests, spreading Inca technology, artistic styles, and sun worship. The road bound a mosaic of different cultures into a single, manageable whole, allowing the Sapa Inca to move troops swiftly to quell unrest and to redistribute goods from fertile valleys to arid regions. Its legacy is a powerful reminder that a road is a conversation with the environment. The Inca did not conquer the Andes by flattening it. They conversed with it, building a network that respected the terrain's brutality while defiantly stitching it together. Today, many of those ancient stone stairways and pathways still trace the mountain spines, a silent testament to a different kind of empire, one built not on the flat plains ideal for chariots, but on the ingenious will to connect a vertical world. But for all their imperial grandeur, the first roads were not born from the decrees of kings. They grew from desire, from the quiet, persistent pull of a single, beautiful object. Deep in the forests of prehistoric northern Europe, along the shores of a cold, gray sea, people began to gather pieces of golden, translucent stone that washed up on the beaches. This was Baltic amber, fossilized tree resin that could be warmed by the hand and carved into beads, amulets, and figures that seemed to hold sunlight within them. To the sophisticated civilizations of the Mediterranean, this material was a magical substance, rumored to be the tears of gods or hardened rays of the sun. And that desire, that deep hunger for a beautiful thing from a distant land, gave birth to one of the world's oldest and most enduring networks, the Amber Roads. These were not engineered highways, but organic trails that emerged over centuries, paths worn smooth by the feet of traders moving south from the Baltic coast. They followed the logic of the landscape, tracing the great river valleys like the Vistula and the Danube, nature's own ready-made corridors into the heart of Europe. This was a Bronze Age internet, a slow-moving system of exchange that began long before Rome was even a village. A trader from a Baltic tribe might carry a pouch of raw amber south, meeting intermediaries along the river who would trade for Central European metals, perhaps tin or copper for making bronze. Those goods would move further, eventually reaching the Alps, where they might be exchanged for Mediterranean pottery or wine. The amber itself, now finely worked, could end up in a Greek temple as an offering or adorn a Roman noblewoman. The Greek explorer Pytheas wrote of the distant northern shores where this gold of the north was gathered, and centuries later, Roman coins and glassware would be found in Baltic burial sites, silent proof of this astonishing long-distance conversation. The genius of the Amber Roads lies in what they were not. No emperor commanded their construction, no legion marched to secure them. They existed purely because of mutual need and the inherent value of the cargo. They created a cultural corridor that linked the so-called barbarian tribes of the north with the classical world, facilitating an exchange far beyond trinkets. Along with amber, metals, and salt moved north, while ideas about craftsmanship, artistic styles, and perhaps even whispers of distant gods traveled south. This network highlights a fundamental truth about human connection. Sometimes the most enduring pathways are not carved by the sword, but paved by curiosity and commerce. The Amber Roads outlasted empires because they served a simple, timeless human impulse, the desire for beauty and connection, proving that a road can begin not with a surveyor's line, but with a single piece of sunlit stone held in a trader's hand. While the Amber Roads whispered of quiet trade, another thoroughfare roared with the sound of continents colliding. The Grand Trunk Road is not merely a path across the Indian subcontinent. It is the region's central nervous system, a 1,500-mile artery that has pulsed with life for over 2,000 years. Its story begins in the 3rd century before the Common Era, when the Mauryan Emperor Chandragupta first ordered its construction to bind his vast empire together. But this road would soon escape the control of any single ruler, becoming a stage upon which the entire drama of South Asian history would play out. Imagine the sheer volume of human experience that has traveled this corridor. The dust raised by the marching phalanxes of Alexander's weary troops mingled, centuries later, with the quiet footsteps of Buddhist monks sent by the Emperor Ashoka to spread a message of peace. That same earth would tremble under the weight of Mughal processions, elephants caparisoned in gold and silk, as emperors like Shah Suri transformed the route in the 16th century. He rebuilt it with a visionary's eye, planting shade trees for travelers, digging wells at regular intervals, and constructing secure caravanserais where caravans could rest. He formalized what had always been true, that this road was the indispensable commercial and military spine of a continent. It became a river of humanity, exactly as Rudyard Kipling later described it. A pilgrim bound for a holy river might walk beside a merchant whose camels were laden with Kashmiri saffron or Bengal muslin, while a detachment of soldiers marched past in the opposite direction, their armor glinting in the sun. The road absorbed every wave of change. It carried new languages, new faiths like Islam, and new artistic styles that blended into the region's rich tapestry. When the British East India Company arrived, they did not invent a new route. They simply commandeered this ancient one, paving parts of it and using it to move troops and administer their colonial holdings. This is the ultimate sign of a timeless network. Its foundational logic is so impeccable that every successive power, from ancient emperors to modern republics, has chosen to rebuild it rather than replace it. The Grand Trunk Road's path now lies beneath modern national highways, a silent, stony testament to a simple truth. Some roads are built for a purpose, but the greatest roads become the purpose themselves, the enduring central narrative of a place, written not in books but in the worn stones and the endless footsteps of history. The Levant has always been a narrow bridge between worlds, a coastal sliver of land squeezed between the desert and the deep blue sea. And running straight through its heart was a road so vital it was named for the constant companion to its west, the Via Maris, the way of the sea. This was not a road built by a single empire for its own glory, but a geographic inevitability, a natural coastal corridor that became the ultimate international thoroughfare. For over 3,000 years, if you wanted to move an army or a caravan from the riches of Egypt to the mighty kingdoms of Mesopotamia, or north to the Hittites of Anatolia, you had only one logical choice. You took the Via Maris, a ribbon of packed earth tracing the Mediterranean shore through the lands of Canaan and Philistia. Its value was incalculable, for it carried the essential ingredients of Bronze Age power. Copper from Cyprus and the Araba, tin from distant sources needed to make bronze, ivory from African elephants, and perhaps most precious of all, the famed Tyrian purple dye, extracted from sea snails, a color that would come to symbolize royalty from Rome to Constantinople. Controlling this route meant controlling wealth itself, which meant it was almost never at peace. The road became a stage for imperial ambition, trod by the chariots of pharaohs like Thutmose III, the marching columns of Assyrian kings, and later, the disciplined legions of Rome. Biblical accounts of the Way of the Philistines refer directly to this volatile coastal passage, a route so dangerous it was avoided by those seeking a safer journey. This constant tension reveals the Via Maris' unique character. Unlike the Roman roads designed for internal control, or the Inca highways for integration, the Way of the Sea existed primarily for connection between foreign giants. It made the Levant not a unified kingdom, but a perpetually contested crossroads. Every fortress city that rose along its path, from Megiddo to Hazor, stood as both a toll station and a bulwark, extracting profit from commerce while preparing for the next army on the horizon. This endless cycle of conflict, however, also forged an astonishing crucible of cultural fusion. In the markets of its port cities, Egyptian papyrus met Mesopotamian cuneiform tablets. Aegean pottery styles blended with local designs. Myths and deities traveled with merchants, creating syncretic beliefs that would shape regional spiritual life for millennia. The road's legacy is written in the layered archaeology of the region, where one city might be built upon the ruins of another, conquered a dozen times over. That foundational role as a global intersection, a fragile land bridge between continents and empires, is the true inheritance of the Via Maris. It established a pattern that defines the region to this day, a place where the world's currents, commercial, military, and ideological, continue to meet, clash, and intertwine along a corridor as old as civilization itself. But the Royal Road was not a dead end at the heart of the empire. It sent a long, probing finger eastward into the vast, open spaces where the world seemed to begin again. This was the Khorasan Road, an extension that carried Persian ambition across the sun-scorched plateau and into the very cradle of the Silk Road. While the Western route managed a known world of cities and seas, the Khorasan Road was a venture into the boundless, a lifeline thrown toward the legendary trading hubs of Merv and Bukhara. For the Achaemenid kings and their successors, the mighty Sasanians, this road was not merely a trade route. It was a geopolitical leash. It allowed them to project military power into the restless steppes, to pacify nomadic confederations, and most importantly, to tap directly into the river of wealth flowing from the east. Controlling this artery meant controlling access, taxing the caravans carrying Chinese silks and Indian spices before they ever reached the Mediterranean. Yet to build a road here was to defy the environment itself. This was a land of crushing summer heat and waterless expanses. The Persian answer was a miracle of hidden engineering, the Qanat. These were underground canals, tunnels dug with breathtaking precision along the slopes of mountains, gently channeling groundwater for dozens of miles to the surface at precisely the point where a waystation or fort needed to exist. A traveler at a lonely caravanserai in the desert, drinking from a cool, clear fountain, was drinking from a mountain miles away, thanks to this ancient, invisible infrastructure. The road did more than move goods and soldiers. It became a sacred corridor. Along it traveled the priests of Zoroastrianism, spreading a faith of cosmic duality and ritual fire into Central Asia. Centuries later, that same well-maintained highway would serve a new faith with stunning efficiency. Arab armies, surging east after their conquest of Persia, found the Khorasan Road already laid before them, a ready-made path for the rapid expansion of Islam. Mosques rose where Zoroastrian fire temples once stood, and the theological currents of the new Islamic world flowed back toward Baghdad along this same stony track. This constant exchange is the road's deepest legacy. It was not a one-way street of imperial command, but a vibrant, often tense, dialogue between two worlds. On one side, the sophisticated, sedentary culture of the Persian Empire, with its written laws and monumental architecture. On the other, the mobile, horse-borne cultures of the Eurasian steppe. The Khorasan Road was where they met, traded, clashed, and ultimately blended. This dialogue, facilitated by a ribbon of dust and stone, would forge the unique cultural alloy of medieval Central Asia, a region that became the great intellectual and commercial clearinghouse of the Silk Road, all because a Persian king decided to build a road toward the rising sun. A frontier is often imagined as a hard line, a wall meant to keep the world out, but Rome understood its borders differently, as a permeable membrane, and the roads along its limes were the threads that wove that membrane together. These frontier highways, like the military road tracing the back of Hadrian's Wall in Britain, or the networks flanking the Danube and Rhine rivers, served a dual purpose that defined the empire's final centuries. Yes, they were strategic arteries, allowing legions to march swiftly to crush an incursion or reinforce a threatened fort. A signal fire lit on a watchtower in the morning could summon a cohort of soldiers by afternoon, their arrival made possible by that straight, reliable stone road. But the true genius of these roads was revealed not in war, but in the quiet moments of peace they engineered. The garrison towns that sprouted along them, like Vindolanda in the north of England, were not just military bases. They became bustling market centers where Roman soldiers with their steady pay mingled with traders from beyond the imperial pale. Here, Roman pottery, wine, and finely crafted metalwork were exchanged for goods the empire craved: Baltic amber, thick northern furs, and other commodities from across the frontier. This was a deliberate economic strategy. By creating a zone of controlled exchange, Rome pacified its borders not only with the sword but with the allure of commerce. A local chieftain whose people benefited from trade was far less likely to raid. Over generations, this constant interaction forged a unique borderland culture. Roman-style villas might appear just south of the wall, while Roman soldiers adopted local styles of dress or worshipped Celtic gods alongside their own. The frontier road became a cultural mixing bowl, blurring the very line it was built to defend. This system reveals a profound truth about connectivity. A road along a border does not merely defend a territory, it actively defines the character of that territory by managing the flow of people and ideas. When the Western Roman Empire finally dissolved, these roads did not vanish. They remained as the foundational economic and social corridors of medieval Europe. The kingdoms that rose in the empire's shadow, the Franks, the Goths, the Angles and Saxons, often built their own centers of power along these same routes, inheriting the patterns of exchange and interaction that Rome had established. The Limes roads demonstrate that the most enduring frontiers are not walls but channels, transforming a line of separation into a space of lasting encounter. While Roman frontier roads managed a delicate peace, a different kind of journey was gathering momentum in the heart of the continent, one driven not by imperial decree but by a profound and personal yearning. A single rumor whispered across the Pyrenees in the 9th century ignited a spiritual fire that would burn new roads into the landscape of Europe. The rumor spoke of a lost tomb discovered in a remote corner of northwestern Spain, believed to hold the remains of the Apostle James. From this quiet discovery in Santiago de Compostela, a vast network of paths began to coalesce, drawing millions of feet from every corner of Christendom. This was not a road built by kings but by faith itself. Pilgrims set out from their homes in France, Germany, Italy, and beyond, following the rising sun toward the far western edge of the known world, a place they called the Field of Stars. Their collective footsteps over centuries etched the Camino de Santiago into the earth, a sprawling web of routes that converged like rivers into a single, powerful stream. To walk this path was to undertake the greatest adventure of a medieval life, a perilous journey of body and spirit that could take a year or more to complete. The roads themselves became sacred, lined not with imperial milestones but with signs of mercy. Monastic orders and local lords, seeing both spiritual duty and economic opportunity, built sturdy stone bridges over treacherous rivers. They founded hospitals known as xenodochia, where the sick and weary could find rest and care. And towering above it all, in villages and towns along the way, rose the magnificent Romanesque churches and cathedrals, their sculpted portals telling biblical stories in stone for pilgrims who could not read. The pilgrimage was a powerful social leveler. On the road, a humble farmer might walk beside a knight, and a merchant might share a meal with a monk. All wore the same simple cloak and carried the same staff and scallop shell, the symbol of St. James that marked them as travelers bound for the same sacred goal. This shared experience, this common hardship and hope, quietly forged a new sense of identity. A pilgrim from Poland and a pilgrim from Portugal, meeting on the road to Santiago, would discover they were part of something larger than their local village or kingdom. They were part of Latin Christendom. This constant flow of humanity turned the Camino into a living information network. Architectural ideas like the majestic barrel vault traveled with returning masons. Songs, stories, and news from distant lands were exchanged in crowded pilgrim hostels. The routes became channels for the great cultural revival of the Middle Ages, carrying artistic styles, musical forms, and scholarly texts from their sources in Spain and France back into the heart of Europe. The pilgrimage road proved that a powerful idea could generate physical infrastructure as durable as any empires. It created a shared map of meaning, written not in treaties but in the stones of 1,000 bridges and the worn steps of countless cathedrals, reminding us that sometimes the most enduring paths are paved not with conquest but with devotion. Faith may have drawn pilgrims across Europe, but in the distant East, a different kind of pilgrimage was being forced open by imperial will. The Han Dynasty faced a crisis on its northern frontier, where the powerful and mobile Xiongnu Confederation raided with impunity. For Emperor Wu Dai, the solution was not merely to defend, but to reach. He set his sights on a geographical lifeline known as the Hexi corridor, a narrow, fertile strip of land squeezed between the Tibetan Plateau and the Gobi Desert. This was the only practical gateway connecting the Chinese heartland to the oasis cities of the Tarim Basin, and beyond them the wider world. Securing it was not an option, it was an existential imperative. In the 2nd century before the Common Era, the emperor launched a series of massive military campaigns, pushing Han armies into the corridor, defeating local tribes and expelling the Xiongnu. Conquest, however, was only the first step. To hold this slender thread of land, the Han embarked on a breathtaking project of military colonization. They did not just build a road, they built an entire fortified landscape. Thousands of soldier farmers were sent to settle the corridor, creating self-sufficient agricultural colonies that could feed the garrisons. Along the route, they constructed a line of walls, not a single continuous barrier like the later Great Wall, but a network of fortified sections linking a chain of beacon towers. These towers were the corridor's nervous system. If a Xiongnu raid was spotted, guards would light a signal fire, and within hours, the message could leap from tower to tower across hundreds of miles, summoning cavalry from the nearest garrison. This transformed the Hexi corridor from a vulnerable passage into a protected imperial highway, a secure tube through which the wealth of the Silk Road could now flow directly into Chang'an, the Han capital. The caravans that began to move under this protection carried more than just bales of silk and sacks of spices. In the 1st century of the Common Era, riding alongside the merchants, came Buddhist monks from Central Asia. The faith that had blossomed in India found its path into China paved, quite literally, by Han military engineers. The first Buddhist texts translated into Chinese emerged from the scholarly work done in the oasis cities along this very corridor. This reveals the profound, unintended consequence of the Han project. By securing a route for commerce, they had inadvertently opened a channel for a philosophy that would eventually reshape Chinese thought, art, and society for 1,000 years. Emperor Wu Dai's ambition permanently reoriented China's gaze. Before the Hexi corridor was secured, China's world view was largely inward, focused on the Central Plains. Afterward, Central Asia became a permanent fixture in the Chinese strategic imagination, a theater of both opportunity and threat. The legacy of that fortified highway is not confined to the past. Look at a map of modern infrastructure projects across Central Asia, and you will see the ghost of the Han Dynasty's logic. The pattern of building corridors of influence, of securing trade routes with a blend of investment and strategic presence, echoes the ancient imperative to control the Hexi corridor. It is a timeless lesson in geopolitics that the road you build to protect your wealth can end up changing your very soul. Gold from the forests of the south, salt from the heart of the desert, and the knowledge that a single misstep meant a silent, sandy end. The Trans-Saharan Routes were not roads in any traditional sense, but a brutal pact between humanity and an ocean of sand. For over 1,000 years, they formed one of history's most daring supply chains, stitching together worlds that were never meant to meet. The Mediterranean coast, with its Roman ruins and Arab ports, lay to the north, To the south, beyond the endless dunes, were the verdant river valleys and dense gold fields of West Africa, home to empires whose wealth was the stuff of legend. Between them lay the Sahara, a barrier so vast and lethal it could swallow civilizations whole. Yet it was here, in this most hostile of environments, that a road network not only survived but thrived, born from a simple, powerful equation. The south had unimaginable gold but lacked salt, an essential mineral for preserving food and sustaining life in the tropics. The north, and the desert itself, had vast deposits of salt, mined from ancient, sun-baked basins, but craved the soft, malleable gold of the south. This mutual, desperate need forged a connection across 1,000 miles of nothingness. The architect of this connection was a single, ungainly creature, the dromedary camel. Introduced to North Africa around the 3rd century of the Common Era, the camel was a revolution on hooves. It could carry 400 pounds, travel for days without water, and its broad, padded feet were perfect for traversing loose sand. With a camel, the desert changed from an impassable barrier to a navigable, if deadly, sea, and like any sea, it required expert navigators. The Berber tribes of the Sahara, most famously the Tuareg, became the master mariners of this sandy ocean. They knew the location of every hidden well, every patch of scrub that could feed their animals. They navigated by the sun by day and by the precise patterns of the stars at night, reading the dunes like a map. Their caravans could be enormous, 1,000 camels or more, moving in a slow, disciplined line that stretched to the horizon, a lifeline of creaking leather and swaying cargo. The journey was a months-long trial of endurance. Temperatures could swing from scorching daytime heat to freezing cold at night. Sandstorms could erase all landmarks in minutes, leaving a caravan hopelessly lost. The price of failure was not just lost goods but a slow, desiccated end in a waterless void. Yet the rewards for success were staggering. When a caravan finally reached its southern terminus, the exchange was epic. In the bustling markets of cities like Timbuktu or Gao, merchants would literally trade salt for its weight in gold, but the caravans carried more than minerals. They carried ideas. With the traders came Islam, not as a force of conquest, but as a faith of merchants and scholars. It spread peacefully along the trade routes, adopted by West African rulers who saw its advantages in literacy, law, and international connection. Timbuktu transformed from a seasonal camp into a legendary center of learning, its libraries filled with thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, and theology, brought across the desert on those same camels. This network created a profound interdependence. The desert empires needed the gold to buy goods from the Mediterranean. The forest empires needed the salt for survival. And the desert-dwelling Berbers controlled the dangerous passage between them, becoming the essential, powerful middlemen. The Trans-Saharan Routes show us that a road is not always a cleared path. Sometimes it is a fragile consensus, a shared understanding of risk and reward that persists across generations. It proves that commerce can blaze a trail through the most impossible geography, creating cities of scholarship in the sand and binding continents together with nothing but courage, camels, and the relentless human drive to trade. The King's Highway carved a different kind of power from the high desert. While the Via Maris hugged the coast, this ancient track chose the inland high ground, tracing the rugged plateau east of the Jordan River and the Dead Sea. It is one of the oldest continuously used routes on Earth, a north-south lifeline mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, where its very name evokes a road fit for royalty. Its endurance speaks to a simple geographical truth. For traders moving the most precious commodities of the ancient world, frankincense and myrrh, from the remote groves of southern Arabia to the courts of Egypt and Mesopotamia, the coastal road was often too dangerous, too exposed to the shifting politics of maritime powers and pirates. The King's Highway offered a safer, more controlled alternative, a backstage route across the roof of the region. This was not a road built by a single empire, but a path of such inherent value that it became a prize, controlled in turn by the Edomites, the Nabateans, the Romans, and later the Muslim caliphates. Each power understood that to hold this road was to hold a faucet of wealth. The genius of the Nabateans, in particular, was turning this control into an art form. They were not producers of the luxuries that traveled the road, but master facilitators. From their astonishing capital, Petra, a city literally carved into rose-red cliffs along the highway's path, they managed the entire ecosystem of desert commerce. Caravans weary from months in the arid wilderness would enter the narrow, towering gorge called the Siq, emerging into the sunlight before the magnificent facade of the treasury. Here they found water, secure storage, and a marketplace. The Nabateans provided protection, guides, and essential supplies, charging taxes and fees for their services. Petra was not just a city, it was a sophisticated service station for wealth, and the King's Highway was the only road that led to its doors. This model reveals how a single thoroughfare could sustain an entire civilization. The Nabatean kingdom, with no vast farmlands or mineral riches, flourished for centuries purely on the proceeds of logistics, on their ability to secure and profit from the flow of goods others produced. It highlights a crucial strategic principle often overlooked: the importance of controlling multiple axes of movement. An empire that relied solely on the coastal via maris was vulnerable. But one that also commanded the inland King's Highway held the entire region in a vise, able to shift trade, move armies, and exert pressure from two directions. The road's legacy is etched in stone at Petra, but also in the enduring patterns of movement. Modern highways in Jordan still follow the general course of this ancient track, a testament to the timeless logic of the high ground, a path that chose safety over speed and in doing so, built kingdoms out of dust and desire. The collapse of Rome did not just crumble stone, it shattered a system. For centuries after the legions withdrew, long-distance communication in Europe fractured into a patchwork of local messengers and unreliable tracks, a world where news traveled at the speed of a walking man or a wayward ship. Yet the ancient need for connection never faded, and from this fragmented landscape, a new kind of network would emerge, one built not on imperial command but on a family's contract. In the late 15th century, as the Renaissance began to stir, a minor noble family from Lombardy saw an opportunity in the chaos. The House of Thurn proposed a simple, brilliant solution to the Holy Roman Emperor: a systematic, reliable postal service that would span the empire's bewildering patchwork of hundreds of states and principalities. They were granted the exclusive right to operate it, and with that contract, they began to weave a web of information that would bind early modern Europe together. Their system was a direct heir to the old Roman cursus publicus, but adapted for a new age. They established a chain of post stations, each a day's ride apart, stocked with fresh, strong horses. A courier bearing a leather satchel marked with the family's horn emblem would ride hard from one station to the next, where a fresh rider and horse stood ready to take the satchel and continue the relay without a moment's pause. This was the circulatory system of power, and its lifeblood was information. A diplomatic letter from the Habsburg court in Vienna could reach Brussels in under 5 days, a journey that previously took weeks. Bankers like the mighty Fugger family, whose fortunes were tied to lending money to kings and funding mining ventures, used this network to move financial documents, bills of exchange, and market intelligence with a speed and security previously unimaginable. Their couriers raced between Antwerp, Augsburg, and Rome, allowing them to react to political shifts and commodity prices before their competitors even knew the news had broken. The Thurn post did more than carry mail, it transformed the very landscape of travel. Their need for reliable schedules forced the improvement of roads and bridges along their routes, turning muddy, seasonal tracks into more organized corridors. Inns and coaching houses flourished around their stations, creating new economic hubs. The family itself became phenomenally wealthy and powerful, their postal monopoly a license to print money and a lever of immense political influence answering directly to the emperor. This network proved a timeless principle with modern clarity. In an age of rising nation-states and global finance, the control of communication was no longer just an administrative tool, it was the primary source of both wealth and political authority. The orderly flow of letters and ledgers laid the essential administrative groundwork for the modern bureaucratic state, demonstrating that the true power in a fragmented world often lies not in owning the territory, but in controlling the lines that connect it. The oldest maps were not drawn on parchment, but etched into the earth by the weather and the weight of countless footsteps. Across the rolling green hills of southern England, a network of paths follows the very bones of the landscape, tracing the high, dry spines of chalk that ripple beneath the soil. These are the ancient ridgeways, roads that were never engineered by decree, but discovered by necessity, worn smooth over 5,000 years of continuous use. Long before Roman surveyors plotted their straight lines, people and animals moved along these high corridors. The dense, waterlogged forests of the lower valleys were treacherous, filled with wolves and difficult to traverse. The chalk ridges, however, offered a natural highway. They drained quickly after rain, remained free of the thickest woodland, and provided sweeping views for safety and navigation. The Eichnield Way, perhaps the oldest of them all, runs like a seam along the Chiltern Hills, a route so ancient it feels less built and more revealed. This was a road of rhythm, not of empire. It pulsed with the slow, seasonal heartbeat of prehistoric life. In spring, herdsmen would drive their cattle along the high ground to summer pastures. In autumn, they would return. Traders moved along these ridges too, carrying not imperial taxes but essential and precious goods. The most staggering cargo of all was the giant sarsen stones used to build monuments like Stonehenge. Geologists have traced the blue stones at that iconic site to quarries in Wales, over 150 miles away. While the final journey may have used rivers, the long overland trek likely followed these high, stable ridgeways for much of the distance. Imagine the generations of effort, the slow, grinding procession of wooden sledges and rollers, inching these monoliths across the high chalk downs toward a sacred destination only they would understand. The ridgeway was a conduit for belief, moving not just stone but meaning across the landscape. For millennia, these tracks served as the primary arteries of local and regional life. Bronze Age metalworkers transported Irish gold and Cornish tin along them to be alloyed into valuable bronze. Iron Age communities built their hill forts overlooking these routes, controlling movement and trade. When the Romans arrived, they often ignored the winding ridgeways, imposing their own rigid geometry of straight roads in the valleys below. Yet the old high paths never faded. In the medieval period, they became drovers' roads for moving livestock to market and pilgrims' paths to distant shrines. Their persistence speaks to a profound truth. A road born from the intimate dialogue between human need and geological reality possesses a durability that often outlasts the grand projects of states. The ridgeway was not imposed upon the land, it was a collaboration with it. Today, you can still walk the same line. The Ridgeway Path is now a national trail, a 139-kilometer journey through time. A modern hiker striding through a field of barley is tracing the exact same high ground where a Neolithic trader once carried a precious axe head, or a Bronze Age shepherd watched over his flock. The path itself is the artifact, a cultural memory written in turf and chalk. It shows us that some of the most enduring networks are not about connecting capitals, but about connecting people to the resources, seasons, and sacred spaces of their homeland. These humble ridgeways, older than history itself, remind us that the first roads were not about conquest, but about belonging, following the quiet, enduring logic of the land itself. A sacred duty could also be a powerful political tool. For the Ottoman sultans, the annual pilgrimage to Mecca was both. As the self-proclaimed caliphs of Islam, they bore the immense responsibility of protecting the faithful on their journey, a task made manifest in the Darb al-Hajj, the pilgrimage road. This was not a mere trail but a meticulously maintained imperial highway, stretching over 1,300 kilometers from Damascus to the holy cities of Medina and Mecca. Its upkeep was a direct reflection of Ottoman power and piety, a physical promise to the entire Muslim world. Sultans like Suleiman the Magnificent poured vast resources into transforming this perilous desert crossing into a secure corridor of devotion. They constructed a chain of formidable forts at strategic intervals, their silhouettes offering a promise of safety in the empty expanse. Between them, teams of engineers excavated deep wells and built vast underground cisterns to capture precious rainwater, creating oases of survival where before there was only thirst. The most vital nodes were the caravanserais, fortified waystations like the imposing Qalat al-Qatrona in modern-day Jordan. Within its high walls, pilgrims could find shelter from bandits and sandstorms, a place to rest, pray, and replenish supplies for the next grueling leg of the journey. This infrastructure was a monumental logistical achievement, but its purpose was deeply symbolic. By facilitating the Hajj, the fifth pillar of Islam, the Ottoman state cemented its legitimacy as the protector of the faithful. The annual caravan, sometimes numbering in the tens of thousands, was a mobile spectacle of imperial authority. It moved under the official banner of the Sultan, accompanied by soldiers, administrators, and even a mobile court to settle disputes. To see the caravan arrive safely was to witness the Ottoman Empire fulfilling its highest religious contract, yet the road carried more than pilgrims. It pulsed with a quieter, constant traffic of scholars traveling to centers of learning, merchants supplying the holy cities, and imperial couriers carrying decrees to distant provinces. The Darb al-Hajj became the central artery of the Ottoman Arab world, integrating diverse regions from the Levant to the Hejaz into a cohesive cultural and administrative sphere. This road illustrates a profound duality. Its primary purpose was spiritual, serving a ritual that transcends earthly kingdoms. But in ensuring the safety of that ritual, the Ottomans wielded it as an unparalleled instrument of soft power, unifying their empire under a banner of shared faith and demonstrating that the most enduring control is often woven not through fear, but through the careful guardianship of a people's deepest aspirations. But the wilderness does not surrender its secrets easily. As European settlers pushed beyond the Appalachian Mountains, they did not carve their paths from untouched forest. Instead, they walked in the footsteps of those who knew the land best, following the ancient, narrow trails of Native American nations. These paths were not drawn on any European map, but were living memories of the continent, etched by generations of hunters, traders, and diplomats moving between villages and hunting grounds. The settlers widened these trails with axe and wagon, transforming intimate footpaths into continental highways of conquest and ambition. The most famous of these was the Wilderness Road, blazed by frontiersman Daniel Boone and his party in 1775 through a natural gateway in the mountains known as the Cumberland Gap. This route was a geographical key, unlocking the fertile bluegrass plains of Kentucky to a flood of new settlement. Within a few short decades, it altered the very DNA of the young United States, shifting its center of gravity westward and adding a powerful new frontier state to the Union. This was not a simple migration. It was a deliberate act of redrawing the map, propelled by a powerful promise of land and independence. The road itself was a brutal gauntlet, little more than a rough track through dense forest, threatened by difficult river crossings and the profound hardships of frontier travel. Yet thousands risked everything to travel it, their wagons laden with all they owned, drawn by the vision of a new beginning. Soon, other trails unfurled across the continent like arteries from a beating heart. To the south, the Santa Fe Trail opened in 1821, a 900-mile commercial highway connecting Missouri to the Mexican province of New Mexico. This was a road of enterprise where American traders in large wagon trains carried manufactured goods southwest, returning east with silver, furs, and mules. It became a vibrant channel of cultural exchange and economic rivalry long before the region became part of the United States. Meanwhile, to the north, the Oregon Trail captured the national imagination in the 1840s. This 2,000-mile journey from the Missouri River to the fertile Willamette Valley was the great overland passage for families seeking a new life. Their covered wagons, forming trains that stretched for miles, became rolling symbols of hope and determination. The journey was a months-long trial, facing river crossings, steep mountain passes, and the constant threat of illness. The very landscape of the West still bears the scars of their passage, with wagon ruts worn several feet deep into solid stone in places like Guernsey, Wyoming, silent grooves that speak of an almost unimaginable collective effort. These trails were instruments of breathtakingly rapid change. They facilitated a mass movement of people that reshaped ecosystems as new agricultural practices and livestock transformed the plains and valleys. They intensified cultural encounters, often with tragic consequences, as expanding settlement displaced indigenous nations and sparked conflict. The roads of conquest became, for the newcomers, roads of opportunity, defining a powerful national narrative of manifest destiny and westward expansion. In a colonial context, a road network is never neutral. It is a physical projection of a new order, drawing fresh borders with every mile cleared and every bridge built. The early American trails did not just connect points on a map, they actively created the map itself, forging a continental nation and embedding a restless, pioneering spirit deep into its identity. The asphalt of a modern highway may seem a world away from the dusty tracks of a Silk Road caravan. Yet across the vastness of Asia, the past is quietly whispering to the present through an ambitious project known as the Asian Highway Network. This is a contemporary vision of connection, an international agreement to standardize and link road routes across dozens of countries. But if you look closely at its proposed paths, you see a startling pattern of return. The flagship route, designated H1, stretches an astonishing 20,000 kilometers from Tokyo to the edge of Europe in Istanbul. Its winding course does not invent a new geography. It respectfully retraces the ghostly outlines of ancient trade corridors. In essence, modern engineers with satellite imagery and geological surveys are arriving at the same conclusions as Bronze Age merchants who simply followed their camels and the stars. They are confirming that the optimal path through a mountain range is still that one negotiable pass, that the most efficient way across a desert is still from one hidden water source to the next. This is not a coincidence, it is a testament to the stubborn logic of the land itself. Certain geographic features, a narrow isthmus between two seas, a river valley cutting through a plateau, a low saddle between towering peaks, act as permanent gateways. They funnel human movement not by choice but by necessity. For thousands of years, these gateways dictated where trails would form, where caravanserais would be built, and where cities would rise. The Asian Highway Network, in its modern, paved form, is simply reactivating these ancient channels on a monumental scale. It proves that globalization is not a new layer imposed upon a blank slate. It is, in many ways, the latest and fastest current flowing through riverbeds that were carved by the slow, persistent drip of history. The shape of our connected world was not drawn by politicians on a conference table, but by the immutable dialogue between human ambition and the bones of the earth. What we call progress is often just a rediscovery, a return to the oldest and most enduring paths home. High in the mist-shrouded mountains of southwest China, another kind of exchange was taking shape, one built on a simple, powerful bargain. The Tea-Horse Road was a network of some of the most perilous trails on Earth, a vertical world where the air grew thin and paths clung to the sides of sheer cliffs. For over 1,000 years from the Tang Dynasty onward, caravans navigated this labyrinth, connecting the lush tea gardens of Yunnan and Sichuan with the high, arid plateau of Tibet. Their cargo defined the route. From the south came dense, compressed bricks of fermented tea, a vital commodity in the Tibetan diet where vegetables were scarce and the tea provided essential nutrients and warmth. In return, Tibetan traders offered the one thing the Chinese imperial armies desperately needed: strong, agile horses bred to survive the harsh high altitude, far superior to the steeds of the Central Plains. This was not grand imperial silk trade, but a localized, essential symbiosis. The survival and military power of each civilization literally depended on the other's specialty. The journey itself was a monumental feat of endurance. Caravans of sure-footed mules and shaggy yaks, each animal laden with tea bricks, were guided by Naxi and Tibetan merchants who knew every treacherous pass and swinging rope bridge. A single misstep on a wet, narrow trail could send a man and his animals tumbling into a deep gorge. They traveled for months, moving between climatic zones, from subtropical forests into freezing, wind-swept highlands. This harsh reality forged a unique cultural intimacy along the route. Operating far from the official Silk Road, the Tea-Horse Road became a backchannel for profound exchange. As Buddhist monks traveled with the caravans for protection, the philosophy flowed into the ethnic regions of southwest China, blending with local indigenous beliefs. In places like the legendary Shangri-La, unique cultural fusions emerged in architecture, art, and daily life, shaped by this slow, persistent traffic. The road was a quiet testament to a different kind of globalization, one driven not by imperial decree, but by mutual ecological need. It proves that the most vital connections can be hyper-local, born from what one mountain valley can grow and another plateau can breed, weaving separate worlds together through a shared, unbreakable dependence. While the Tea-Horse Road wove together mountain valleys, Rome was stitching continents. The Via Egnatia was a line drawn with imperial purpose across the rugged spine of the Balkans, a direct overland bridge from the waves of the Adriatic Sea to the shores of the Bosphorus. Commissioned around 130 years before the Common Era by the Roman proconsul Gnaeus Egnatius, this was the empire's first great road built beyond the Italian peninsula, a declaration that its reach was now irrevocably transcontinental. It began at the port of Dyrrhachium, where travelers from Italy would disembark, and struck eastward for over 1,100 kilometers, through the mountains of Illyria and Macedonia, across the plains of Thrace, until it reached the ancient Greek city of Byzantium at the edge of Asia. This was not merely a convenience, it was a strategic masterstroke. Before its construction, moving between the Latin West and the Greek East required a long, perilous sea voyage around the Peloponnese, vulnerable to pirates and the whims of the weather. The Via Egnatia offered a reliable, all-weather alternative, a landlocked corridor that Rome could fully control. It became the primary highway for legions marching to reinforce the volatile eastern frontiers, their hobnailed sandals pounding a rhythm of Roman order into the stone. But with the soldiers came everything else. Tax collectors moved the wealth of the eastern provinces back toward the treasury. Merchants carried olive oil from Greece and fine textiles from Anatolia westward, while Italian wine and metalwork flowed east. The road was a massive cultural funnel, accelerating the blending of Roman and Hellenistic worlds. Its true transformative moment, however, arrived centuries after its construction. When the Emperor Constantine chose the sleepy town of Byzantium as the site for his new capital, he was not selecting an empty field. He was choosing the powerful eastern terminus of the Via Egnatia. Overnight, the road's purpose was elevated from important to indispensable. It became the main western artery of the new Constantinople, the primary land route through which food, soldiers, and diplomats would reach the heart of the Byzantine Empire. For 1,000 years, as Rome fell in the west, this road sustained its eastern successor. Later, it would guide a very different kind of army. When knights from Western Europe answered the call of the Crusades, many marched the length of the Via Egnatia, following in the ghostly footsteps of Roman legions, but now bound for Jerusalem. They saw in its enduring pavement a promise of passage, a tangible link to a legacy of movement they were now continuing. The Via Egnatia's legacy is that of a permanent seam. It did not just connect 2 points, it defined the contact zone between Europe and Asia Minor, a fixed channel through which every major historical current for nearly 2 millennia would flow. Empires rose and fell, religions clashed and merged, but the need to traverse that specific corridor never faded. It proves that some roads become so foundational to a region's identity that they outlive every political entity that ever tries to claim them, remaining the eternal path between worlds. While empires traded in silk and gold, the true currency of survival flowed from a far more humble source. Salt was the silent guardian of the medieval world, the only reliable way to preserve meat through the long winter and to sustain communities far from the sea. Its extraction and trade forged an entire subterranean economy, a web of dedicated paths known as the salt roads. These were not the grand imperial highways of legend, but the essential capillaries of daily life, carrying a crystalline commodity so precious it could be exchanged ounce for gold. In Italy, the Via Salaria spoke this truth in its very name. A Roman road originally built to transport salt from the coastal pans of Ostia into the heart of the peninsula. In Germany, a different source bubbled up from deep below. The brine springs of towns like Halle and Lüneburg produced salt through boiling, and the paths leading from these inland mines became arteries of regional power. Packed trains of mules and wagons, their cargo carefully sealed against damp, would follow these routes to distribution centers where the salt would be portioned out to local merchants. A city's entire identity could be born from this trade. Take Salzburg, whose name literally means salt castle. Its formidable fortress was built not just for defense, but to oversee and protect the lucrative salt barges moving down the Salzach River. Controlling a salt source was a license to print wealth, granting local bishops and dukes the kind of influence usually reserved for kings. But the impact of these roads was felt most powerfully not in castles, but in the humble market squares that dotted their junctions. Where a salt route crossed a navigable river or where 2 trails met, a settlement would inevitably take root. An inn would open for the carters, a blacksmith would set up shop to repair wagon wheels. A weekly market would be established where farmers could trade their grain or livestock for that vital mineral. In this way, the salt roads acted as a quiet, persistent force of urbanization. They determined where people gathered to exchange not just salt, but everything else. The need for a preservative literally paved the way for the growth of towns, which in turn became nodes for broader trade, administration, and culture. This reveals a profound layer of historical development. Beneath the glittering narratives of silk and spice, there existed this foundational network of micro-trade, a system built on a simple, universal human need. The salt roads remind us that civilization is not only shaped by luxuries, but by the practical, gritty logistics of staying alive. They show how the quest for something as basic as a seasoning could quietly etch new patterns of settlement and commerce into the landscape, building the local foundations upon which grander empires would eventually rest. The story of the road as an instrument of power does not begin with empires of stone and marble, but with empires of mud and clay. In the fertile crescent between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, where civilization itself first learned to write and build cities, the rulers of Mesopotamia faced a problem of scale. How do you administer a kingdom of scattered temple cities, vast date palm orchards, and distant grain silos, all connected by the unpredictable moods of great rivers? Their answer was etched not in stone, but into the very earth they ruled. The Akkadian, Assyrian, and Babylonian kings developed extensive networks of beaten earth roads, the first deliberate systems designed not for wandering but for governance. These were the original blueprints for state control, written in dust and wheel ruts. In the bustling cities, you might find paved streets of baked brick, a luxury of urban order, but the true power of the network lay in the long, straight tracks that shot out across the plains. An Assyrian king like Ashurnasirpal II would commission royal inscriptions boasting of his great deeds, and among them, he listed a profoundly modern achievement: opening up mountain roads. This was not a public service announcement, it was a statement of raw capability. It meant he could move his most fearsome asset, the Assyrian chariot corps, from the heartland to a rebellious frontier with terrifying speed. Imagine the sight and sound, a cloud of dust announcing the approach of these lightweight, agile war machines, each carrying a driver and an archer, arriving along a road the king himself had ordered cleared. The road enabled shock and awe centuries before the phrase was coined, but the daily traffic on these routes was more mundane and in many ways more foundational. Officials traveled with clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform, the world's first paperwork carrying tax assessments, royal decrees, and grain quotas from the central palace to provincial governors. Donkey caravans moved the lifeblood of the economy, sacks of barley and emmer wheat from the fields to the storehouses of temple complexes and walled cities. This constant, regulated flow turned geography into administration. A road meant a tax collector could visit on schedule. It meant a hungry army could be fed from distant granaries. It meant the king's word, pressed into a tablet of wet clay, could become law in a week's journey. What the Mesopotamians perfected was the concept of the road as a linear organ of the state, a vein through which the authority and resources of the center could pulse outward to the furthest limb. They established the fundamental template that every empire after them, from Persia to Rome, would encounter and instinctively understand. They proved that to rule a territory, you must first be able to reliably cross it, and that the most enduring power often begins with a simple, cleared path through the mud. The true legacy of these 25 networks is not a list of forgotten paths, but a single, profound revelation. Roads do not merely link the world, they actively sculpt it. They are the chisels that carve the shape of civilization from the raw stone of geography. Consider the most fundamental human act: where to live. A road does not find a town finds a road. It clusters at the river crossing where the water is shallow, at the mountain pass where the climb is lowest, at the caravanserai where the well is deepest. These are not accidents of history, but direct consequences of infrastructure. The road creates the reason for a settlement to exist, and that settlement, in turn, becomes a new node, pulling the road's influence deeper into the landscape. This dynamic forges entire economic worlds. A major highway creates a fertile hinterland along its length, a zone where farmers know their grain can reach a profitable market and where artisans can sell their wares to a constant stream of passers-by. Conversely, regions bypassed by these networks can fade into isolation, their resources untapped and their voices unheard. The road, therefore, draws the first, invisible borders of wealth and influence long before any king draws a line on a map. But what flows along these channels is not always benign. A road is a vector, a conduit for every force human society can produce. It carried the sublime beauty of Buddhist sutras into China and the solemn prayers of pilgrims across Europe. Yet along those very same grooves in the earth traveled less welcome passengers, the great waves of illness that periodically reshaped the medieval world, including the profound challenges of the 14th century, moved at the speed of trade and travel, following the Silk Roads and pilgrimage routes with terrible efficiency. This duality is inescapable. The Roman road that allowed a legion to crush a rebellion could, in another season, allow that rebellion to spread and coalesce. The Appalachian Trail that delivered settlers to a promised land also delivered conflict and profound change to existing communities. A highway centralizes power, enabling an emperor to project his will, but it also decentralizes resistance, enabling ideas and armies to move against him. The road is ultimately neutral, amplifying whatever purpose it serves. Look at any road from history, and you are looking at a physical manifesto of a society's soul. The relentless straightness of a Roman highway shouts of order and control. The delicate, swaying rope bridges of the Inca Qhapaq Ñan speak of a conversation with impossible terrain. The fortified stations of the Ottoman pilgrimage road display a blend of deep piety and calculated political authority. Each network answers a fundamental question: what matters most to the civilization that built it? Is it the efficiency of military logistics, the sanctity of a spiritual journey, or the sheer, audacious profit of long-distance trade? The road is the answer, made not of words but of stone, dirt, and enduring effort. So we arrive at a final, transformative understanding. These great networks did not simply connect the dots of a pre-existing world. They drew the dots themselves. They determined where a city would rise, where a battle would be fought, where a new god would be worshipped, and where a language would take root. The map of human history, with all its centers of power and corridors of exchange, is not a stage upon which roads were laid. It is a painting, and the roads are the bold, initial strokes that define the composition. Every time we follow a modern highway through a mountain pass or cross a river on an ancient bridge, we are traveling a line that was first imagined by someone, a trader, a pilgrim, an emperor, or a shepherd whose choice to put a path in that exact place quietly decided the shape of everything that followed. The road, therefore, is the most enduring architect of our world, silently guiding the footsteps of history toward the present we now inhabit. From the stone-paved highways of Rome to the desert trails of the Sahara, these 25 timeless road networks reveal a fundamental truth. Civilization is a story of connection. These arteries of stone, dirt, and sand carried far more than goods and armies. They were the original social networks, the physical threads upon which the tapestry of our shared history was woven. Along them traveled not just silk and salt, but sacred texts and scientific instruments, artistic styles and architectural blueprints. A new way of thinking about the stars, born in one river valley, could find a home in another, thousands of miles away, simply because a path existed to carry it. This constant, slow blending of ideas and beliefs across continents is what gradually formed the complex, interconnected world we now inhabit. Our modern era of instant communication and global supply chains can feel unprecedented, a sudden shrinking of the planet. But these ancient roads remind us that globalization is not an anomaly. It is simply the latest, fastest chapter in a very old and enduring tale of human interdependence. The container ship crossing an ocean and the fiber optic cable under a sea are both descendants of the first trader who loaded a camel and looked toward the horizon, following a desire line older than memory. So the next time you merge onto a modern freeway that cuts a straight line through the countryside, or you trace a wandering path on a topographic map, pause for a moment. You are following in footsteps that are millennia old. You are traveling a corridor first cleared by merchants dreaming of profit, by pilgrims seeking grace, by explorers fueled by nothing but curiosity. They were the ones who, against all odds, chose to bridge the divide. They looked at a mountain, a desert, a raging river, and instead of seeing a barrier, they saw a question. And their answer, etched into the earth itself, became the foundation of everything that followed. Thank you for joining this journey through the corridors of history. If these stories of connection have resonated with you, consider subscribing to delve even deeper into the rich fabric of our shared past. We would love to hear your thoughts as well. If you could travel one ancient road from history, which path would you choose and why? Share your answer in the comments below.